Hendrick Motorsports and colleague. A big penalty came down for some, messing with the louvers. The louvers are these vents in the hoods of the race car, and basically the air travels into the grill and out the hood of the car through these louvers. And NASCAR saw something that the teams had apparently done to modify them that they didn't like, and came down on all four teams sort of individually, penalizing each team $100,000 and 10 playoff points. And so actually they were docked 100 points as well. So I think the 31 car for Justin Haley is now minus 40 or something.
Right.
So he's in a hole. He's got less points than I do. And, Bowman was leading the points, and now he's, 27th or some. So it's a massive penalty across the board. And this penalty has, you look at the numbers, okay, $100,000, write the check, 100 points. There, say bye-bye to those 10 playoff points that you might have had or never had. That all will, the points situation will resonate throughout the season, because, this could affect them deep into the playoffs as they cycle through the rounds. Should they get to that point, they will miss these playoff points. This conversation will be in the broadcast booth, regrettably, all year long. And we will be talking about, as we go through the playoffs, all of the things that the Hendrick cars experience, that 10 playoff points, and how that's going to affect them is going to be part of the conversation. And now introduced into this as well, so Chase Elliott is not penalized, right? Should he come back and do well, right, get into the playoffs, now we've got to explain to everybody why Chase Elliott is not part of this conversation, right? And how, we had the same situation last year with the owners' points, where Kurt Busch and the 2311 and the owners' points and drivers' points and everything was different. There was owners that, there was drivers that weren't in the playoffs, but owners that were, cars that were without the drive.
Switching drivers and putting them in. 2311 did that.
Yes.
Yep.
And so all of this throws a big monkey wrench of confusion into us trying to explain to, the casual fan why, we'll have to explain this multiple times.
Yeah.
As each round of the playoffs goes by, and every, this driver gets knocked out or this driver moves forward, why Chase Elliott is unaffected by the points and his teammates were, and how that affects him in the drivers' championship, but his car and his car owner in the owners' championship will be affected differently. So, anyways, that is frustrating for me as a broadcaster, but we have the knowledge now that Hendrick is going to appeal this penalty, which I think obviously they should. Anytime, I think, if you're a car owner and you get a massive penalty, unless it's like, man, I've caught red-handed and everybody in the world can see what I did and there's no way around this. Nobody except for Hendrick and NASCAR really know exactly what they did, right? None of us has seen this piece,
right? And
none of us know, no one, right? And until, unless that was laying in front of the on the table in front of me and you, I absolutely would go appeal this penalty.
Which they used to do that. I remember when they used to take apart and confiscate it and then put it out in the trailer for everybody to see. But I would, if I'm the recipient of a historic penalty, I appeal it even if I know I'm guilty.
Right. And so here's the challenge, for Hendrick Motorsports, this is the frustration from the team's side. Okay.
All right.
They have been, the next gen car has been a product of collaboration. NASCAR leaned heavily on the manufacturers and the teams to help build this car.
That's right.
They leaned heavily on the manufacturers and the teams to have a lot of grace in getting this car ready, and also they've asked for grace from the teams and the manufacturers on supplies, parts, limited parts, all of those things being frustratingly slow in development and design. They've asked for grace in safety on this car. And so, it's been a big, massive collaboration to get this car done. And then in this off season, there was a lot of resubmitted designs for improvements from the firewall forward on all the cars. The Ford cars had some challenges with parts and pieces fitting properly last year. Chevy had some overheating issues. So anyways, there was a new submitted front end design for every manufacturer that had to be processed this off season. So it has to go to NASCAR to get approved. The manufacturer gets the approval. Then they have to submit the drawings and the CAD to the design team that's going to manufacture these parts. And all this has to happen really quickly. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars get spent by everyone involved to be able to get all this stuff out and ready for Daytona so they can go to the racetrack. And again, doing all this with the limited supply chain, limited parts coming back to the teams getting, just enough parts to get their cars to the racetrack. And so all of this had to be done in collaboration, right? And so the reading, if you read the Hendrick response to the penalty, there's some information in there that leads me to believe that the parts that they get don't fit the agreed upon designs. The parts that they're getting are coming to them out of tolerance. And so one part laying on a table does not look or fit exactly like the part laying next to it. And so that is frustrating. And there has been apparently some communication back and forth on what are they allowed to do to get this part to fit. And that's where I believe that's where I believe the confusion lies.
Well, do you mind if we just read the statement? Because I haven't actually done it. You said read the statement. Let's just go ahead and do it for our listeners in case they haven't either. So I'm going to, this is from Hendrick Motorsports on their website. On Friday at Phoenix Raceway, NASCAR identified louvers on our race cars during a voluntary inspection 35 minutes after the opening of the garage and prior to on-track activity. NASCAR took possession of the parts approximately 4 hours later with no prior communication. The situation had no bearing on Saturday's qualifying session or Sunday's race. The statement cited several facts that include louvers provided to teams through NASCAR's mandated single-source supplier, which is a big deal, single-source supplier. They're told who to get these parts from, do not match the design submitted by the manufacturer and approved by NASCAR, which I think is what you just alluded to, Dale. Number two, documented inconsistent and unclear communication by the sanctioning body specifically related to the louvers. 3 recent comparable penalties issued by NASCAR have been related to issues discovered during a post-race inspection. For the March 19th NASCAR Cup Series event at Atlanta Motor Speedway, Hendrick Motorsports has elected not to request deferral of personnel suspension, citing a strategic decision. Atlanta is now drafting a drafting track in a super speedway style race. Substitute crew chiefs have not been determined. So then they get into the penalties, but I think they just addressed the thing that you were.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically what I'm getting from that is that NASCAR and the manufacturers work, NASCAR and Chevrolet, Toyota, Ford, they are the ones communicating back and forth. Chevy or Toyota says, hey, I'd like to alter this part or submit a new proposed nose piece, whatever it may be. That's a communication between the manufacturer and NASCAR. Once it's approved, then the manufacturer goes to their teams and says, here's what has been approved. So there's this sort of line of communication. It's not direct team to NASCAR. It's not NASCAR to HMS.
Right.
So it goes through this long process of emails and exchanges, right? And so I believe that, there is a frustration from the teams that the parts all aren't the same. And so in a world of, in a world of restrictions and rules that are within thousandths of an inch, and you get a part that's quite a ways outside of the box and it's going to change the performance of your race car, there would be frustration. If I know, like, I can only go get 4 of these pieces off the shelf, all 4 are going to measure differently. I've got to pick the one that I think performs the best, and the rest are basically useless to me. But nope, I have to put them on a car to go to a West Coast swing. I've got cars all over the country. I got cars in haulers heading in different directions, going to different racetracks.
That's right.
Right.
The West Coast swing certainly makes you have to do a logistical Olympic almost.
Yes. And so, I get to the racetrack and find out that they don't like something that I've done to this part to get it to fit on this race car.
Yeah, you just can't put a runner to the shop and come back and
no, they're not racing at Charlotte Motor Speedway right across the street. And so, I think that in my opinion, I understand 100% that NASCAR needs to be able to govern these cars, and the parts and pieces are single source. That's a statement that it means basically, look, man, you buy this thing off a shelf, you bolt it on the car. We don't want you doing anything to it, not in the name of performance or safety. And so you're leaving all that in the hands of the organization, NASCAR, and the manufacturer of the piece. I understand how they need to govern to be able to keep people from cheating. And I've always felt really strongly about coming down with a hard, big hammer whenever anybody ever does anything blatantly illegal. But at the same time, if the parts that are coming, which are, carbon fiber and molded and cooked and they're being made in a very, I wouldn't say rushed fashion, but I mean, there's a limited amount of these pieces. There was a big push in the off season to get all new stuff made for all the manufacturers by one brand, one company is making all these pieces for everybody. NASCAR chooses this company that's going to cook all these parts for all of the support, right? Mm-hmm. And they got to provide enough for everyone for multiple cars, right? Because we got to go to, we got to go out west. We got cars heading in all directions. And so I can understand the frustrations across the board for NASCAR, but I can certainly understand the frustration for HMS in this situation. To have a part that doesn't quite meet, this part doesn't look like the design that was submitted and approved. All right? Now, if the part came to you and it's exactly like it was approved, I think that really NASCAR has a great case. But if it comes to you and it's like, hey man, it's a little bit off of what the computer model is, and now when I put it on the car, it doesn't fit like it's supposed to because it's not the same size. So I think that's where Hendrick is frustrated. They're not only having to, cut on these pieces to get them to actually fit on the car, but they're out of the performance box, or they're so out of tolerance that you're going to go to the racetrack and get beat by these pieces. And so it's a tough spot for everybody to be in. With all of that knowledge, I feel like that the penalties are far too severe. And, it's the biggest penalty, in my opinion, that's ever been handed down in the sport. And I think that there should be, I think that HMS is right to appeal, and I believe that they will have a likely resolution that lessens this penalty in some way, some form. I don't know if it goes away entirely, but I think, with everything that we know about limited supply, the pieces and parts coming in different shapes and forms, not all meeting the same sort of measurements. I mean, when you're racing and critiquing things to 1,000th of an inch, and the difference in 1,000th of an inch could be 1/10 or 2/10 on the racetrack. It's got to be frustrating. So I think that with all of that information, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. So
let me play a devil's advocate just for a second.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that I believe this. I'm just playing devil's advocate since you gave a very good argument on behalf of the teams. No, so clearly we can say that NASCAR is saying that there's been some sort of alterations to this part that has helped their performance. Wouldn't you think that a race team would say? Wouldn't they make a case for the imperfections and the urgencies that these parts have been manufactured? Wouldn't they do that by default, even if they had been doing something that they blatantly knew that was going to affect the performance?
We're making an assumption that they did a modification that would help performance.
That is an assumption. That's what I'm saying. I'm playing devil's advocate, which is nothing but an assumption. I don't even know if I'd go so far as to say I'm assuming that's what happened. I'm just saying, knowing teams the way they do, listen, we've been busted. I remember when Tony Jr. was messing with the spoiler, and he got handed a big old penalty. But we know that Tony Jr. had an argument, and but we also know that he was doing, he knew what he was doing, and yet he's going to argue that he was innocent on this, and that's just what teams are going to do. So I'm just saying, NASCAR is basically saying that they did some sort of modifications. Otherwise, they wouldn't penalize them, right? Yeah. My God, if that was not the case, they're penalizing them just because the part isn't what they approved. That is a big problem, and I think that's a very winnable appeal.
Yeah, I do too. So I think that NASCAR is not wrong in saying, look, don't touch it and don't work on the part. They're not wrong in that, but if the part comes to you, if you buy 4 of them and they're all different,
you buy 4 of them and
if
they're
you're
all
buying four carbon fiber pieces and all of them come to you different shapes and different tolerances, and they're to get that thing to fit the way you want it to, and to get it to fit and look and perform exactly like the guy in the garage next to you, right?
Yeah.
And NASCAR gave them apparently some areas where they could manipulate this piece.
So that they fit?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, they gave them some areas to make it fit. And it still was so different.
Well, think about the line of communication of where they could work in. I mean, all of the emails and back, the going from, approvals to CAD, the pieces get approved from the manufacturer to the organization NASCAR, then back to the teams.
It's flawed. It's susceptible to some miscommunication.
Yeah, it sounds like some things could get dropped and misinterpreted, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's definitely imperfections in the process.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it, but and this is all new because this was never the way the sport was ran in the past.
Right.
Of certainly now, nose pieces, tail pieces, roofs, and all those things were approved through the manufacturer. The OEM would have to get it approved, and then that information would come through the OEM to the team. So, I mean, that line of communication is not uncommon in NASCAR, but to be doing this for every single part and piece on the race car, and as they continue to get redeveloped and redesigned and resubmitted, it seems like that it could get a little murky. And the teams are going to, if you say, hey, man, we're going to allow a little leeway here, I think that the teams are going to take as much as they can, right? They're going to look at that and read into that and as much as they can. And while maybe there should have been yes, certainly NASCAR has a right to be frustrated by what they saw, the fact that they are in this position as a group and they have all worked in tandem to get here, and they took the parts off before the cars raced and competed in competition, I think this penalty is a little too severe.
That's a huge distinction that you just said. They actually, because they wiped the floor with everybody except
Yeah.
Kevin Harvick. I mean, but yeah, the Hendrick cars have been very fast. They don't look to be slowing down anytime soon, but they didn't race with the parts.
I agree. And I think, too, you got to look at how we don't want favoritism in our sport, but the teams and the OEMs, the manufacturers, everybody in NASCAR has worked together to get to this point and to, sort of get smacked around so bad in front of the whole industry is a bit tough to take if you're a team owner and putting so much of your own investment into getting the sport in this new direction with this new car, right? Think about the Garage 56 program,
Right?
Where Hendrick and NASCAR and everyone's working together. Same thing, same collaboration, right? You would think that there would be, you would think that there would be a little, what's the word I'm looking for?
Grace, maybe a little bit of a partnership.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who knows? I mean, like if certainly to get a historic penalty, you would have appreciated a heads up that you're tampering into some territory you're gonna regret. Back out while you still can, or something like that.
And I think NASCAR would say that they gave them that a heads up. But yeah, grace is the word. I think everything that they've been through as an industry to get to this point with the car, and the grace that the teams and the manufacturers have shown NASCAR with the car, could go both ways.